Now's the time to upgrade your writing. Pro Writing Aid is 25% off.
What are we doing today? What are we doing today?
Good, right? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Better. Let me open up. I don't like myself. I want to see real quick. Maybe on my photo actually. Spot patterns. So let's run through things real quick. Nalani, are you here today? No, Nalani, all right. Sam, gotcha. Frankly, all right. Daniel, no Daniel, okay. Dom, Mac, let me see you. Actually on the screen. Nathan, I see you. Jacob, I'm not quite here yet, probably on his way. Mariana, see her. Kendall,
Here.
Good to see you. Kenya? Good. All right, I don't see. David, are you there? I don't see. Drake on the phone. I mean, on Zoom. He's not on the phone. All right, Preston's not here. All right, Sam Hall, want to be here. Sam, are you on Zoom? Kale, I see you. Mia? Alexander? Alex?
Yeah, sorry.
You're okay. Elijah?
Here.
Andre? Alexandra? All right. Krista? I see you on Zoom. Okay. Haley? I see you. Allison? I see you in the back. Logan?
Good.
I saw you. Respect you. Aubrey? No Aubrey today? Remy?
Here.
I see you. Riley, I saw you. Josh? Adriana? All right, so I'm gonna go through those who didn't answer in case they should have. Nilani? Brinkley? Daniel? Jacob's probably still stuck in traffic. Mariana? Yeah. I saw you. And then, all right. David? Sam Hall? Preston, I know I'll be here. Mia? Andre? Aubrey? All right, I don't see Joshua or Adriana. Okay, so. Let me go up and see if we can change that later. No. Post that, just like this. So. Today, I have another Zoom to watch, but first. We are going to read a little something. I'm not gonna read all of this. But I'm gonna read some of it, and I want you to ponder on it. It's called Thinking Without Language. Psychological science is the only life science that has not fully assimilated the theory of evolution. The main obstacle is the human mind, language in particular. Many people are willing to accept the argument that non-humans evolved according to the Darwinian principles of descent with modification, as honed by natural selection. But they balk at applying those principles to something as complicated as the human mind. What does that mean? They're balking at what principles?
Physically, evolution makes sense, but the mental development doesn't.
Very good. Very good. This shop's in. Human mind and language seem inseparable, and with good reason. Most people can't imagine that thinking can occur without language. During the last 50 years, however, many research programs on animal cognition have begun to obtain evidence that non-human animals might think without language, specifically by organizing information into cognitive maps. Okay, let me see if this is student. Hello. Yes, this is this. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay. Anybody? Okay, so that was unnecessary. I'm sorry, guys, I was thinking maybe it was a student. So I apologize. So where were we at? All right, so most people can't imagine that thinking can occur without language. During the last 50 years, actually, let's stop there, it's a good place. Do we think that language can occur, or thinking can occur without language?
Yeah.
Do we remember times when we were little where it might have? Right, when we're still learning languages of our parents, right, still communicating. Think about that. A lot of times we don't connect communication with thinking, but when you have a toddler or a baby that reaches for something, right, there's a thought pattern there, even if we don't acknowledge it, right? Keep that in mind. So, now, during the last few years, however, many research programs on animal cognition have begun to non-human animals might think without language, specifically by organizing information in cognitive maps. Additionally, since the 1970s, another line of research is focused on whether non-human animals can learn language. The consensus is that they cannot. Why that's the consensus blows my mind when you think about Marvel's learning sign language. But that's a anyway. Just personal opinion. Throw that out there. That leaves us with the question, how do animals think without language? I have addressed this question in 2 research programs. One concerned with the ability of a chimpanzee to learn language, and the other with the ability of a rhesus mat to memorize lists of the equivalent nonsense syllables. So, what do you think about that concept? We will get further into those studies later, because they're not so much, but I want to open that conversation up for you guys. I want you guys to be thinking about this when you leave this room later, right? Who has pets in here? Anybody ever been like, man, I swear they speak English? You just animal and they just do it, right? This is just fresh on my mind, I think, because I just got a dog. She's about a year old. I got her from a friend. And she's smart as a whip. Annoyingly so, this dog, right? Already figured out where we keep the treats, sneaks in there when nobody's in there, takes her pig ears at her leisure. Went to give her a pig ear and it was empty. And I was like, she's not always constantly eating them, so she's smart enough to know, right, to space it out, right? And she's smart enough to understand not to get caught, right? Never been caught before, but already knows that, right? When you say something like get down, calm down, or you had it, she hears it in your tone and she was what she's golden Aussie, so she's very hyper. Right? My kids are still acclimating and we have cats. And my kids apparently are cat people, except for my youngest, was very excited to get a dog. Haven't had a dog in years. But with this move, I decided why not, right? So I find this interesting because we speak to animals and we train them in our languages, right? Agreed? Whatever language we use at home is the one we're communicating with our animals in, yes? Right? So would it be a biased position to say that animals don't speak languages, but animals think without language? You say no, why?
Because all creatures have forms of communication.
True, but I'm saying if we're speaking to them and we're training them in our own language, that would convey what?
They understand it.
That's putting a lot on them in the context of understand, but it's saying that they relate to it, right? Because we ask something of them and they answer, right? We repeat something enough and they learn the response that is most, we'll say, well received from us, right? Now, does that make the argument they speak languages, that they have their own language? No, but you've already kind of cut forward your little ahead, sir, in the context that us putting that on our animals, but at the same time saying that because they don't speak our language out loud verbally, they don't think in language is a lot, right? It's pretty biased, pretty I would say ethnocentric, but it goes beyond that, right? Because it's a species arrogance, right? Saying humans are above other species because we speak in the way that we speak and we communicate in the way that we communicate. Now, many of you may not be familiar with this. I was just raised with this, had a mother in psychology. This is one of her favorite things, but I was very partial to gorillas growing up. I don't really know why. But I always liked them. I like the dolls. I like to go see them at the zoo. So my mom nurtured that by teaching me about Coco. Anybody know who Coco is? Okay, who's Coco?
The gorilla who communicated with her like keepers with sign language.
Yes, one of the first that managed to learn the entire sign language alphabet and not just one, multiple alphabets. But what is Coco's real claim to fame? And for a while it was sign language, but there's something else. There's another precipice she broke between animals and humans, and more specifically between apes and humans, right? It was this idea for a long time that we were not similar. And before we said it was language that separated us, when she learned sign language, we couldn't say that anymore. So we said something else separated us.
Emotion.
Good job. Somebody's been reading. Good job. Yes, emotions. Now, Coco's claim to fame is that she broke both those barriers in one heat. Nathan, how did she break that barrier? Do you remember? Do you know who Lipstick is? Her cat. Yes. Now, I'm an animal person in general. I don't strive to be a cat person. Probably because my children have cats and they drive me nuts. Because I can't just have really cool regular cats and I gotta have the strange weirdos. Okay, all my cats are weirdos. They do weird things like bark instead of meow. One of them does that, right? One of them is a guy's guy, right? My daughter's cat got pregnant recently. It's a whole thing. Almost died over summer, but the whole thing because she got an infection. Miserable. I'll save you the gruesome details, but guess who got stuck nursing that cat back to health? Mama, right? Now, did we bond? Yes, but does that cat hate everybody but my daughter? Absolutely. Absolutely. She is a black cat and she's a demon. I am convinced. Okay, hates everybody but my daughter. And to the extent that she taught herself to open doors so she could get wherever Hattie was. And when I say open doors, I literally mean paw to paw, turning a doorknob and hanging from it, and then pushing her body to open that, just a crack so she can jump down and get through it. Okay, I thought my house was haunted for a year because of this cat, okay? You guys laugh when I'm breaking that. Spooky metaphor with that joke, but that is actually factual, okay? My house was haunted. The cat has driven me to the brink more than once. But my daughter has been obsessed with cats since she was little, and that's what she wanted, and they like her too. Just posted TikTok on Facebook about this little child that brings a bobcat to her ring door camera, and her mom goes, "What is that?" And she's like, "It's soft." And she goes, "Put that down." And you can hear the fear of the mom. You can hear the fear in the mom's voice, but she's trying not to freak out. And the daughter goes, "But it's sweet, I promise." And then it just turns at the camera because mom's like, "Put it down." It goes, very not sweetly. But it's not attempting to get out of this toddler. It's a toddler's hands. That would be my daughter. That is my daughter. Okay, she's a cat whisperer and freaks me out. But Moon does weird things. I will say, "Get off my counter, you know better," right? She will look at me and sit on my counter. Like not moving, right? My daughter comes in and goes, "Here, Moon." She can be across the house. "Here, Moon." And what does that cat do? Takes off, right? My daughter went on a cheer competition to Vegas and I got stuck in Vegas due to weather. When I tell you that this cat haunted me until my daughter got back, I'm not kidding. Like literally I was in trouble with this cat because she did not come back on time. Because my daughter said, "I will be back in 4 days." And then was perfect for 4 days. And on the 5th day, stuff got weird. That cat was scary. But when I say haunted me, she still put her feet under my door because I don't let her in my room. And she would howl under the door. she's a loud howler. And when Hattie's not there, when they go to their dad's on the weekend, she will howl through the hallways. Like it's like a siren song of sadness. Literally, I have to stay in my room because you can't function. Moon gets very upset when you don't acknowledge that she does not have Hattie. To the point where I would FaceTime my daughter every day for this cat, anytime she was away. So yes, I think that when we look at our animals, right, we tend to place personality traits on them that we would normally accept. But we don't take into context that they may experience their own spectrum of emotions, right? And we completely negated that until Coco. Now, what Coco has to do with emotions is she had a cat named Lipstick. Okay, and this is not an extraordinary cat. It was a yellow striped kitty cat, whom she named Lipstick for whatever, I don't really know why, but she chose the name. Keepers didn't name her. She named the kitty, right? And she raised this kitty as her own baby, like the way that, you know, some of us treat our animals like they're extension of us, they're little peoples, four-legged peoples, right? She treated this cat like it was a four-legged people. And then this cat passed. And the grief that Coco showed over that is what broke that boundary, right? It's what transcended the concept that animals do not reciprocate feelings the way that we reciprocate feelings. Right? I mean, this was a deep grief. This was not just momentary. This was a long, extended period of deep grief that is apparently it transcends all species, right? Because you can tell when animals are in mourning. You can tell. You can tell because grief is synonymous among all cultures and species, right? You can recognize upset. You can tell when animals stop eating, right? You can tell when they're not feeling themselves, right? For Coco being an ape, right? Or an ape family, say being gorilla, she cried. She cried and she howled and she refused to eat. She refused to communicate. She refused to acknowledge people. She isolated herself.
I'll be right back, stay.
Are those relatable? Have any of you experienced grief and done the same thing? Right? Have any of us ever isolated, cried, right? Long periods, not wanted to eat, not wanted to socialize, not want to do anything, but situate and come to terms with whatever we're feeling in that moment, right? I'm not going to get too specific with grief because everybody has their own grief, right? Coping mechanisms and all of that. So grief is individualized, but it is a concept. It was one of the first next to language, right? That transcended the boundaries between species. Because after that, people started observing other animals in the zoo that lost their partners, right? Breeding programs, right? Started noticing that in breeding animals, when the animal that had bred that was supposed to go to another zoo was taken away from the mom, they started recording that and observing it and realizing there was separation anxiety and grief, right? Loss. There was a period of not understanding, like they trace all of this, right? Why I bring this to your attention is because what I want you guys to think about while we're thinking about things like generational trauma, right, is the way in which we perceive everything around us as it is in comparison to as we are, right? So from a human standpoint, because we consider ourselves human and we look at ourselves through that lens, how arrogant are we when we approach the feelings and concepts and behaviors of other organisms, right? Because that's what we'll be getting into next. Because psychologically, that says a lot about us as a species, but it says a lot about us as people too, right? Now, we will get further into that, but this gives you time to research Coco. This gives you time to research Lipstick, who, by the way, did receive another cat, raised that cat as a child until it passed as well. But again, same response. So I would get familiar with context, maybe write down some experiences you've had as a pet owner or someone who's interacted with animals, right? Things that were uncanny to you in relation to how they responded and how you would expect an animal of different species to respond, right? And we see those TikToks with people call the porch cows. I'm very interested in that. But they have children that bond with these porch cows, right? Nobody seen these TikToks or Facebook Reels? For me, it's Facebook Reels. I don't do TikTok, but my daughter does, so I occasionally see them. But interesting concepts. So I want you to think about this, ponder this, right? And we're not going to get into this till next week, but this is me giving you a preemptive start on that. Okay. Food for thought, literally. I do want you to think about it. Now, let us watch this TikTok and we'll talk about it. Back to what we were learning.
Dakiapi Chante Washtena Chuzepe. My name is Serene Thinau, and I come from the Ihangtuan Lakota Oyate and the Sichango Lakota Oyate. It's very important for me to greet all of you in my Lakota and Lakota language because it's not only a connection to my cultural identity, my family, and who I am today, but it's a connection to my ancestors. Given everything that our ancestors went through as Indigenous people, it's a revolutionary act to speak the same language that they spoke. Those very words were attempted to be eradicated through assimilation. So it's a great honor of mine to be able to talk about the topic of intergenerational trauma and healing. When I was in my 20s, I began to experience a lot of really, really difficult emotional and psychological things. I was confused. I was having trauma symptoms. I felt alone. I was away from everyone. I was living in Boston at the time. And I remember one night I had a dream. And in this dream, it brought great insight into the path that I would forge ahead personally and professionally. In this dream, I was at the bottom of the ocean floor. I was looking around me and it was literally at the bottom of the ocean. And next to me, there were 13 other people. I didn't know those people, but we all had an understanding that we were there for a reason. In front of us stood this very tall, beautiful, slender woman who had long, long, dark hair, and it went all the way down to her feet, and her hair would kind of move around, and she had a long, dark blue dress on, and her dress flowed. And she said to us, not with her words, but through her mind, to our hearts and minds, we understood. She said, this water that we are in right now, it is within your bodies and it is within the earth body. It is very sacred. And this water, with the energy that each human has inside of them, with set intention, you can create different things with this water. And she started to use her hands and she started to make beautiful formations, and we were watching her create all of these things. And then she stepped forward closer to us and she started to create a circle. And in that circle, a tornado formed. And it was a little tornado, and we were watching her hold this. And she took that tornado and she threw it down on the ocean floor, and it cracked a huge divide. And when that happened, a huge tsunami wave came up. And in that wave, it was as far as you could see on both sides and as high as the sky, and she froze the wave. And she walked over to me and she said, do you see this wave? And I told her, I said, I'm terrified. I don't know where my family is. I don't know where anyone is. I'm terrified. I'm going to die and they're going to die. And she told me, this huge fear, this wave that you feel is what your people feel every single day because of the effects of everything that you have been through. It's grief, it's shame, it's addiction, it's death, it's genocide. It's all of those things that you feel. And I said to her, when this wave comes down, I'm going to die. I'm not going to survive. And she reminded me that those things are not true. You don't want to get swept away with a wave. You have more tools and resiliency through your lineage than you can even imagine. And she handed me this stick, almost like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. It became very, very majestical, but it was truly very powerful. There was something in that. She gave it to me and she said, "You stand strong. You stand strong because when this wave comes down, if you believe and you hold on to that, your ancestors will be with you." And the wave came down and I was okay. When I woke up, I had profound clarity about the work I wanted to do and the work I knew I needed to do personally to become a better person, a better woman, and eventually one day a better mother. As we talk about these experiences of trauma that I'm mentioning, we have to kind of break it down a little bit first. So the first one is what you hear the most, which is psychological trauma, which is referred to usually in the individual aspects of who we are. So things like a single event or multiple events can happen in your life that can alter your brain chemistry, it can alter your biology, and really interfere with your overall functioning. We move on to more of a collective trauma, which is this intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma simply is the passing on of trauma from one generation to the next. This can happen biologically. We know now through epigenetics that the things that happened to people that came before us are literally alive and can be activated within our DNA because of markers and imprints that happened to them generations ago. So that's biologically, but we also know behaviorally that we can pick up things in our environment and we can emulate them because it's what we learned and it's what we knew. So that's how the intergenerational transmission can happen. More specifically for Native people, we know historical trauma, which is an emotional and psychological wounding because of massive group trauma. We know that for here in what we call Turtle Island or the US, it's been centuries upon centuries of genocide and various things that have brought us to conditions today. That is the most frequent question I hear from non-Native people who don't know about the true history and know about how it affects their families still today. They ask the question, why do so many Native people struggle with alcoholism? Why are the suicide rates so high? Why is there poverty? We can't even broach that question without first understanding the history and how it's not a blaming game. It's not to say, you know, that we're owed these things. It's simply about education and connecting so that we can move forward.
I'm here to talk to Dr. Mark Bunnage.
My role at Vertex is to lead our global research and development strategy and trying to understand the biology of disease, then come forward with a potential new medicine to treat that disease. That's what motivates me and my team every single day.
So the most common example, there's something called the boarding school era that started in the early 1800s. This is a picture of Carlisle boarding school. And what happened generation after generation is that Native children, through government law, were taken from their families, kidnapped and placed in these schools so that they could be assimilated and become the best white Christianized version that they could be. So in this process, we know through lots of documentation and stories from survivors and family members of those survivors that sexual abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse, the moment they walked through the doors, they had to cut their hair. They were told that they were sinful for being born Native. And all of these things, as you can tell, are traumatic. So we have whole generations of our Native youth that were disrupted from their kinship systems and everything that kept them feeling whole and safe. And if you think about generation after generation, when they would leave the school and try to go out and have families, you can imagine how difficult that was. Shame upon shame. So there's a famous saying called kill the Indian, save the man. This picture really does illuminate that, how our people has such a rich, beautiful connection to the land, to stories, through the clothing that we wore, the foods, very intelligent ecological systems that we knew how to navigate. All of those things are present, right? And then you move to the picture to the next, or the next picture over, and it really does show the attempt to kill the Indian and save the man. So as you can imagine, when someone repeatedly tells you who you inherently are is wrong. Everything about you is wrong. And in order to be saved, you have to become this other person. You'll never fully be that person, but if you follow us enough, maybe you can be saved. What happens is something called internalized oppression. Internalized oppression is the act of feeling as if you no longer need any of the external abuse because you're doing it to yourself. So that internalized oppression becomes really a poison for your heart and your mind, and the basis of it is shame. So again, this is not a Native only experience, right? I think everyone can relate to something in their lives where they felt maybe was very negative or difficult or abusive, and how you internalize that to be true. And we know that those things are not true. What happens in our communities is sometimes this internalized oppression turns to what we call lateral oppression. Lateral oppression is where we are turning against each other as Native people at different times. Resources, just different things. And because we haven't navigated the space yet of understanding how to heal from all of the traumas that have been handed down to us. So epigenetics is an amazing growing body of research that really talks about how the events in our environment can leave imprints within our genetic makeup. And like I said earlier, those things can be handed down to the next generation. Dr. Eduardo Duran does amazing work in this field, and he talks about something called the soul wound. And I feel like it's really important when we're having this discussion to mention the soul wound, because he talks about how the elders taught that the soul wound is where intergenerational historical trauma, it goes to a place where no blood flows, which means our spirit. It means our soul. And for Native people, for us to continue thriving and healing things that our ancestors simply did not have the space or time to heal because they were literally in survival mode, that we have a unique opportunity right now to heal things within our genetic makeup because we have more of a stable ground and more tools and things that they did not. So when I was younger in my 20s and around the time I had this dream, it felt so heavy what our people were going through, what my family was going through. It felt so heavy that some days I felt like I couldn't breathe. What I realize now, what once felt like a burden feels like a privilege and feels like a responsibility to be able to honor them by creating changes in my life today and being able to see that maybe there's some things that I was born into that are not only difficult and traumatic, but are profound and powerful. So some of the symptoms that are unique to intergenerational trauma and historical trauma are that it's not just the typical PTSD symptoms. A lot of Native people in Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart's research actually report having flashbacks or nightmares of being a part of some form of genocide or battle or attack.
Okay, let's talk about this real quick. These symptoms. Where have we heard these symptoms before? Where have we run across them before? Maybe not heard, but you might be taking that a little too literal.
PTSD,
Huh?
isn't it like close to PTSD?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, it is. All right, what chapter did we discuss this in? While we're checking that, well, I'm not gonna tell you, I want you all to look. Okay. How familiar do these look? Do we think intergenerational trauma, or when I mentioned the term generational trauma, did we connect the dots to any of these things? We think it was a intangible concept. And in theory, I suppose it is not tangible, but in reality and the outcome, right, the fallout, so to speak, very tangible. very tangible in the way that it's observable, right?
Chapter 9.
Chapter 9, that it's shared across, good job, that was quick. So, I thought I'd have one more time talking to that, but, so, I want you to think about that though, okay? I want you to think about this concept of tangible versus intangible, right? What does tangible mean? Do we know what tangible means? You can touch it. You can touch it, something that you actually can reach for, something quote unquote concrete, right? But how many of these symptoms are actually tangible? Give me one symptom on there that's tangible.
The physical symptoms.
Which is,
It's just issues. Behavior, anger maybe.
I would not say that anger is tangible. I would say the probably two that you're gonna go with are the somatic or the physical symptoms because you feel them, not because you can touch it, because you can feel it, right? Same concept in reverse, but I would call that tangible in a respect, right? Confusing because you don't know why you're experiencing these things and normal remedies don't work because there's not anything really wrong with your body that's causing pain, right? It's psychological, but it's still tangible because you still feel pain. Right? And then I would say self-destructive behavior. Right? And suicide. I don't have it on here, but suicidal ideation, the next step obviously is attempting. And we know what happens after that, right? Either succeed or you fail. As far as I'll go with that, so I'm not trying to take this into a dark place. But I want us to consider this. I want us to recognize this. How many are surprised to see so many symptoms associated with intergenerational trauma or any generational trauma whatsoever? Be honest, it's okay. I see a couple of you raising your hands and I appreciate the transparency. Absolutely. It was shocking to me too at one point because it's not something I associated in this context. I thought of it as like a memory that we carried, right? And in my family, it was big, right? Because my mother's family survived the Holocaust, fled the Holocaust, right? That's its own genocide, its own intergenerational trauma that we're still dealing with today, right? There's a lot of fallout and traditions that I took for granted and didn't understand were created that aren't actually part of the Jewish religion. They have become part of the Jewish culture, right? And as it stands, because of the way Jews now present themselves and interact with each other and the outside world, they are often confused as a race or as an ethnicity. And in fact, they are not either, right? They're a religious group, subset, community, culture, right? And there are different kinds, Anakazi, Sephardic, right? We don't need to get in the details of all of that, but the point is, they are constantly confusing. You say you're Jewish, people think that's an ethnicity, right? I used to go around when I was once saying Jewish and Spanish, because I thought it was an ethnicity until I was about 7, right? But misconceptions, misrepresentations, and just unobservable behavior, right? Now, my mom is not a practicing Jew in the sense of even in the Reformed, because my mom would have been a Reformed Jew, her parents were Reformed Jews. My mom's just not, she does not subscribe to religion, but the importance and the significance of what happened historically to her family within the Holocaust denies her the freedom in many ways because of guilt and shame and intergenerational trauma of saying I'm not religious and just swearing it off completely, right? Because of what happened, we have to remember that is a concept within the Jewish community. Never forget. Always remember, be hyper vigilant, never trust, look for the next Hitler, basically, right? That's why you see all these Jewish communities go up in arms anytime anything happens in relation to any kind of settlement or community that is Jewish, right? Because immediately that protection, that fear of the Holocaust happening all over again comes back. Because for the Jewish people, the Holocaust is our apocalypse, right? That was almost our annihilation in literal terms, right? And so there's this concept that I tell people that's a new age concept, but it's being Jewish by heritage. You're not an ethnicity. How could you possibly Jewish by heritage, right? It's culture. It's continuing the ideas. It's carrying on the torch, being ever vigilant, always identifying as a Jew, whether you practice or not, so that we don't ever lose numbers if we ever have to group together and protect ourselves again, right? These are fallouts, these are behaviors that have been incurred from intergenerational trauma, right? Now, let's finish this. What I want you to think about that was just another third example I could present to you guys that we've already talked about, slavery and Native Americans.
And so this is something that really, I think, illuminates that epigenetics is very much real and alive in a spiritual way as well for our people. I want to mention my best friend. I always bring him with me into talks because he is a profound soul. He's no longer here in the physical form, but he is here in the spiritual realm, in the spiritual way. And before he passed, he and I had many, many talks about doing this very work together. And I was going to be the kid sister that let him come up front because he was handsome, charming, knowledgeable, knew the songs. He was all of those things. And I was the kid sister that would support him. So when he left, he passed away of addiction. And so he's very much a part of this intergenerational story, this historical trauma. He embodies to me the polarities of what trauma can bring. We know when we experience great trauma, we experience things in black and white. Things are all or nothing. I'm either safe or I'm terrified. And my brother did embody those things. And I used to feel such deep, deep pain about that. What I realize now is his life had so much meaning and so much power, and he was such a teacher that even though he left the earth realm in his late 30s, he taught us so much while he was here about healing and his hopes for helping our people to heal, that I had to bring him with me in this talk today because I know that he would be so proud of all the work we're doing. And yes, that's the two of us as little babies reading a book together. He did tell me a couple years before he passed away, we were looking at that picture, and you can't see it in this picture, but we're looking at a book. And he said, you know, sister, I distinctly remember pointing my finger so that I could look like I was like really smart and old and the cool older brother. And he said, I had no idea what was on that book, but I just, and that was so my brother. So as we think about the people we love around us, not only as Native people, but human beings, we think about the different ways that we can heal. I think we have to really broaden our horizons and really shift the paradigm of what healing looks like. It's different for every person. We need our clinical westernized interventions. We need those things. But in addition to that, we need to go back to the roots of what it means to be human, how to learn to be in our bodies again, how to learn how to be a good relative. Some of these things can only happen through community. And so we need to provide spaces and build healthy communities to be able to address some of these things. So one thing I wanted to mention that's really powerful in terms of creating healing, we've talked a lot about the trauma itself, but there are many things that we do to remember our ancestors. And one of them is called the Bigfoot ride. And if you don't know about this ride, you should really research it, look into it. It's a powerful way that through a dream, the man who started this received this dream of, you need to go back and honor your ancestors. You need to pray for their spirits. And so they go on this ride through the winter, and they end up at the site and they say prayers. Now, we can't take back the trauma, the difficult things that happen, but a big part of healing our traumas, both individually and collectively, is finding a way to integrate those difficult, painful things into our daily existence that has purpose and meaning. So I'd like to leave you all with contemplating what it is that you carry for your ancestors, for your family, for your lineage, that maybe you run from, that maybe there's a lot of fear that you don't want to face. It's actually a really unique, powerful opportunity every time you feel anxiety and grief and all of those things to look deep inside and realize that you do have all of the resources, you have all of that energy to be able to heal. And I end with this. My brother, it's one of the last pictures that he took. He passed away in Hawaii. And I bring the water back in because in the beginning we talked about the power of water. Water itself is neither good nor bad. It's sacred. And the water in this picture reminds me of the stillness that he had, even through his difficulties and his trauma and his addictions. We have the ability to heal. And now I think of the grief that I carried so profoundly after he passed, and I feel still. I feel like the water is still because I know that he's with me. Thank you.
Okay. So we have like no time, but we're gonna try and make the most of this 3 minutes. So what do we think? Give me some thoughts. Just throw some thoughts out there. To be deep, they don't have to be profound. I just want to know what you think. So what do we learn from that? What do we gain from that? What do we feel about that? Zoom, you guys are required to participate too. Come on, somebody
Wonder-
guys.
I find it interesting how some people can have survivor's guilt and have flashbacks of some things that they wouldn't even have an idea that's about from past generations. Like you said, like flashbacks of battles and stuff, they wouldn't have any idea what that's like, but they still have flashbacks of it. I think that's kind of different, but
It's interesting, and I think a lot of people either know that as spiritual or psychological, right? Because in this day and age, we've been exposed to enough examples that we can create something in our own mind. Something interesting about the human mind, though, that I like to put out there, that kind of creates a conflict in critical thinking, right? And I'm all about that. I'm not teacher, I'm not jerk, so sorry, guys. But the human mind does not create basis. So, in any dream you've ever had, if you've ever dreamed of a stranger, right, or been in a place with a crowd of people, right, that you've seen faces in, right, they weren't just blurs, right, those are all faces you've seen. At some point, your mind has filed away, whether it's in an auditorium where you know nobody, right, or a room full of people that you've met, or however long the semester goes, right? However long the school year in high school or middle school or primary school was. Interestingly enough, every face you've ever seen in a dream has been one you've seen in real life at some point. Now, how that person is manifested in your dream is your brain, right? Your subconscious, your psyche, so to speak. But it manifests whole events, it manifests whole experiences, whole feelings and emotions, right? Any of us ever woke up terribly sad, but don't know why? Terribly angry, just in that ratchet mood, right? We don't know why we woke up on the wrong side of bed, but we sure did, right? What about afraid, fearful, terrified, right? Woken up out of a dream, startled, or just terrified because it was a nightmare of some sort, right? That's your brain creating these events, which sometimes you don't even remember, but the feelings remain, that adrenaline pumping, or that grief, or that extreme happiness. Anybody ever had a dream they just didn't want to wake up from? And then you wake up and life is so depressing. Just like, man, why? Let me go back to sleep, right? But I want you guys to take note of that, right? That's how the brain works. It works in mysterious ways. It's one of the reasons why psychology is such a new and contemporary science, so to speak, right? Because we're learning new things every day. Top-down processing, bottom-up processing, right? These are all in chapters that we learned in the first 6 weeks, right? But overall, how would we define generational trauma?
trauma that is passed on through generations.
Yeah, but how?
Religions and
I got you, Sam.
and It's imprinted.
It's imprinted. So you have genetically, it's passed on genetically, emotionally, culturally, socially. I want you guys to think about that. That's how it permeates. That's how it continues, right? However, it's not all doom and gloom, right? There's this amazing thing that humans especially are capable of. It's called resilience, right? And I want you to look into resilience because resilience is what gives us the elasticity to hit rock bottom and come back. Will we always have things like PTSD, depression, generational trauma, trauma in general? Yes. But does that break us? Does that determine us? Does that limit us? It doesn't have to, right? So your homework for this weekend, right? Besides your normal mind tap, is going to be, speaking of which, can everybody get into mind tap? Everybody's gonna be able to do that? Okay, one of my online classes not playing, like 6 chapters behind because of it. Okay, so your homework is to go home and think about resilience. And then I want you to go through each chapter that we've gone through, and I want you to come up with one example of resilience and another concept that you can link it to. Okay, so that is what we're going to come back and discuss on Friday, right? So let's not do all the chapters. Let's say chapters 1 through 10. We'll keep it short. Okay. Also, I'm hosting a quiz this evening. It's going to be a pre-quiz on chapter 13 because some of you have experienced mind taps, some of you do better than others. Then we're going to do a post quiz. The only purpose of this is for mind tap. Okay. Which is why I didn't make it. I wanted to get through what we need to get through because that was my priority, not mind tap. Okay, but I will be posting it. So we can do it'll just be a little Blackboard quiz. I'm not gonna make it any more than 10 questions, okay? It's gonna be extra credit, right? It's not gonna take away from your grade. It's just gonna be extra credit. And then we'll take another one. I'll post it on Sunday night and that'll be the post quiz, right? But they gave me some questions. I'm just gonna choose from. It'll be easy. I'm just giving you a heads up to it. Okay? Have a great day, guys. By the way, Friday, I expect more participation from my Zoom members. Okay, or I'll just start calling names. Okay, I hope you guys have a great day.